Hello, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us for this. This is our third talk in the series Artists in Conversation, a collaboration between Leighton House and the Yunus Emre Institute in London. It is an absolute pleasure and a real honour to welcome the celebrated artist and author Laurelie Rae. Her work as a ceramicist is informed by a fascination with architecture and architectural ornamentation, and by an appreciation of traditional Iznik ceramic processes, motifs, and colours. She creates work that is both beautiful and practical, art for the home as art. And I think for us at Leighton House, those principles and ideas and points of inspiration have a particular resonance. Do submit questions. We're keeping some time at the end of the talk when I can put those questions to Laurelie. Laurelie, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us this evening. We're so excited to hear about your journey as an artist, and you're joining us from Istanbul this evening.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much for having me and for this opportunity. Yeah, I'm very interested to share my journey. It was never a straight path, that's for sure. It had lots of bumps and kinks in the road. So should we start with the presentation?
That would be lovely.
Yeah, all right. So here we go. All right, so I'll just give a very quick background about my education, because my education has really influenced my artistic journey quite significantly. I went to Concordia University in Montreal, where I did my Bachelor of Fine Arts. There, I had a very, very interesting, quite a few interesting teachers that affected me and influenced me quite a bit. I can remember quite a few interesting moments when I first started my degree. But I had one teacher who was, kind of crazy. Always had her hair all over the place and always kind of came in the room like there was wind behind her. But one of the things really stuck with me, and that was, if you are starved or looking for inspiration, always look up. And I thought, what is she talking about? But then I started putting that into practice. So with this simple kind of act of looking up, there's so much more in the world you see than just at eye level. And that kind of comes into later on how I would become kind of enamored with architecture, whether it be Islamic or otherwise. Because architecture is made to be looked at, to be looked upon. So I see some continuity there. But before I get into all of that, I'll just quickly say that I did my first master's at the Princess School of Traditional Art in London, where I specialized in Islamic ceramics, specifically Damascene and Iznik ceramics, which is, a very interesting tie into Leighton House, because they have quite a collection and a room dedicated to the Damascene tiles. And then also, I just recently finished a master's in visual art and communication design at Sabancı University in Istanbul. So I got to take my work that is generally on ceramic and on paper, and I was able to work with motion graphics, work more within, the digital framework. I'm not very good at it, but I tried. So what I want to get into in the beginning is, before art school, before all of that, I had two very, or I have two very creative parents in their own ways. My dad is the kind of person who can kind of make anything from everything. He also was a fine carpenter before he started building houses, and would build, you know, piano legs, just incredible things he would make. And then my mom, she's the one who really has the creative skills where, you know, she was very, very good at drawing. But one of the things while I was preparing this talk was I was looking into what are some of, how can I trace back my interests? And as we go along, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I brought it back to the china cabinet that my father made for my mom and what she put inside of it. And she had a love for blue willow ceramics, not ceramics, porcelain. So here's the first one we can see here. Little did I know, you know, 30 years down the road, that I would be looking at this china pattern that, you know, we would eat off of on special occasions. I had no idea the significance and where this kind of initial influence as a child would take me. Even I'm kind of laughing about it a little bit right now, because it only kind of dawned on me a few days ago while I was preparing for this talk.
And that memory came.
Say again?
And that memory sort of resurfaced.
Absolutely, because I work predominantly in blue and white. So it's really interesting, and I've done a lot of research about how that blue and white came along the Silk Road, where it came from, where it went to, and the effects that it had on, you know, the Dutch Delft ware, on blue willow and chinoiserie, also in Turkey, in Iran, in China. They're all using the cobalt glazes. So tracing those things back has actually been quite useful, actually. It's perhaps I'm still in the early stages of realizing, being a little bit awestruck by that connection. I was always encouraged as a child to explore things creatively. Same with my sister, and you know, I think that encouragement is what brought each of us to where we are in our life. So the next slide. Here are some, so you can see, definitely you can see the influence of the blue and white. This is from my time in London when I was doing my master's. So if we focus on the middle, I'm not sure, can my cursor be seen? Yeah. Okay, yes. So if we focus on this middle section, and I apologize for not the best photo here, but also the cups down here too are a good demonstration. I was definitely exploring the blue and white, but then I was exploring the different traditional patterns that we have. So here we have an architectural pattern. This is a tepelik form in Turkish here. And instead of using it in the traditional kind of sense of, you know, in architecture, I used it as a motif on ceramic. Same with this spiral here. Usually this is called a snail motif in Iznik, vernacular, I guess you could say. But instead of just having it around the rim, it's actually funny to describe this. I got this idea from, you know, the vegetable steamer baskets that kind of come up like that. Yeah, it just kind of appeared like that. And then this one is a baba nakash. It's a very, very early 1500s kind of pattern. And I just did the outline, which kind of changes how the pattern looks. And then this last one in the middle, it's quite interesting, this pattern here. It is found I mean, this is the Ottoman Empire for you, what I'm about to say. So this motif here is actually a Christian Armenian motif that represents a cherub, an angel. It's a very abstract form, and you can find them in a church. These are on tiles. You can find them in a church in Jerusalem because Sultan Suleiman brought Armenian Kütahya artisans to fix the Dome of the Rock tiles. So they brought that with them to Jerusalem. And then also, I found the same motif in a mosque in Koca Mustafa Pasha in Istanbul. So it's interesting that it's in both. So I guess I should talk a little bit about my traditional training in Turkey. That would make a little bit more sense here. So in 2013, I first came to Turkey with a conference with the design center here. And I was asked to stay to teach. I guess I just kind of jumped at the chance, and I returned in early 2014. And while I was working there, I wanted to learn a traditional art. And since I had a ceramic background, my mother was a ceramicist, I decided to go with what I knew best already, not jump too far off the train. And I started learning the ceramics. My teacher, well, one thing I can say is Iznik ceramics, it's not as rigid as illumination or as Ebru or as calligraphy. We don't get an ijaza, we don't get a license. Pretty much you learn how to make the composition, the motifs, and then you're kind of free to make what you wish. And the teacher I had was, very inclusive and very supportive of me, kind of taking the patterns apart and making something new with them. Let me see. So yeah, that's how these bowls and plates and everything came to be. This is a good example too of taking something apart. So this central plate where I have the cursor over, you can see kind of three areas. We have this outer, middle, and central. I think I've included a full photo here. But if you see here, I have taken it apart, the pattern, and put it over three pieces that stack together. Let's see if I included it. Not so much. I'll go back to the other ones. Oops. I'm sorry, technical difficulty here. So that was another way. I was looking for different ways to use the motif, respect the tradition, but also at the same time, as an artist who had a significant artistic background already, I needed to do something that satisfied myself too. So that's how these patterns came about. Also, to bring this artwork back into the home, back literally into your hands. It's great. We can see it in a museum in Istanbul, in London, in Leighton House, but there's no tactility to it anymore. Okay, I can see it behind glass, or I can see it on a pedestal. What else, right? So these bowls or these cups or these plates were a way to make our homes beautiful, make our, not dining experience beautiful, but this kind of goes more into slow fashion or slow eating or slow culture, where, we're not just digesting to digest, we're not just using to use or to consume. And
I suppose that it goes back to what you were saying earlier as well about the beautiful china that your mother kept in her cabinet. You specifically said as well that it came out, and as a family you ate from it for special occasions. So you can loop that back to your childhood experiences as well, really.
Yeah, and this I made an entire dinner set, and I think in the next slide or the slide with the Prince Charles, I made a whole dinner set because it was going to be the first time in, what was it? I think almost a decade that my entire family was together, because people live in different countries and different parts of Canada. So to get every single person together at every single occasion is near impossible. So I wanted to kind of commemorate that occasion as well, which is how that bespoke dinner set kind of came about. Let's see the next slide. So these ones are much more traditional. When I was doing my master's program at the Prince's School, I wanted to explore the main styles that we find within Iznik, with underneath the Iznik umbrella. So I started with Baba Nakash, and the reason it's called Baba Nakash is because the name was found penned underneath a piece, underneath a kandil, like this kind of vase we have here. And it's specifically blue and white, which shows a lot of the early influences from Ming Dynasty. Also, even the divisions, we get that too. So yeah, these two are a pair. They kind of go together, or they sit together. They're, relatives, so to speak. Let's see the next one. Yeah, this is the same, the exploration. So we have the Kütahya style here, which is, very colorful, and it comes later. Then we have what we call Sham Uslub, which is the Damascene style, which is where we get this kind of olivey sage green and this purple color, which, you don't find it, it's very rare to find it in the Iznik style. And then the last one here, I call it my Rustem Pasha plate because I made it influenced by the exterior panels of Rustem Pasha Mosque, which are quite beautiful. So that was my exploration. And I feel bad, I forget what the slides are. But the next one, this is the one I want. So, these large plates are part of what I called my Damascene garden. There are 3, but we can only see 2 at the moment. They're much more traditional, but I wanted to, I wanted to make something big. I wanted to make something, it was very heavy too, heavy to work on. They're about 50 centimeters wide each. So when it comes to ceramic, it's quite a bit of a feat to make something that large without it cracking. I mean, the kiln gods were very friendly to me that time. All 3 of them came out, unscathed. And then you can see the table there. You can see the table settings, yeah? And that's kind of how I had it set up during my exhibition. And yeah, I wanted it to be welcoming. I had been shown nothing but being welcomed by friends and now people who are family here in Turkey. And I wanted to kind of mimic that experience and also, make my family feel welcomed in a way, because we're a family that, we may not have conversations, but we send recipes and food photos of food we make. So we're definitely a family that bonds over that. So it was important. Let me see here, the next one. Take note, I think the next slide is going to be about these 2 pieces in the background. This is where my analysis, this is my academic brain that comes in. I really feel, as an artist, but also as an author and a museum educator, I feel kind of stuck between both worlds of, the historical aspect and the art and perhaps a little bit more spiritual side of my artwork. So these patterns up at the top here were an analysis of it's not a hidden mosque, but it's a less traveled to or less popular than other locations in Istanbul, and it's Kiliçali Pasha Cami. And by looking at the outside, you wouldn't know that what you're going to find inside is there. So when you go inside there, it's incredible. So here's the watercolor version, and I'll go back to it, but here's the ceramic version. So the walls, mihrab walls, so the prayer-facing wall, are lined with some of the most exquisite tiles I've ever seen. And you don't find those patterns anywhere else. It just feels very special. And then you also have these incredible stained glass windows that flank the entire building. And there's kind of a lightness to that location. So I wanted to commemorate that with these patterns and learning how to create them. Am I going too fast?
No, not at all. We have a question, which, given what's on the screen as well, it's, somebody would like to know how do you actually get the red color? They're saying that they understand that you get blue from cobble, but how do you get red?
The red color actually isn't technically a glaze. The natural red color, which this red color here is not the original red color. It's very difficult to mimic now. Red color, if you've ever been in Turkey and you've seen the tiles up close, it's not really a red color, it's terracotta. And basically why it's terracotta is because it's a terracotta slip. So they've used the slip, which is basically you take some of the clay and you dilute it with water so it's paintable. That color that you see is much more orange than red. So if you want to compare what you see on the screen here, it would be significantly, I'm just looking around if I have one here. I do, but I'll show it after. It is significantly more brown and orange than this like kind of fire engine red. Nowadays, we kind of stick to this one, but also, if you were to see them, you would see that it's raised on the surface. You can feel that the other glazes are different than the red ones. You can feel a tactile difference. I hope that answers that question. And there's lots of secrets surrounding. Pardon me?
You referenced that earlier, that idea that your work is to be picked up and held and used because of the tactile qualities.
Yeah, I'm a very kinesthetic learner. I realized this. Let's see, what's the next slide? So I guess surprise for me also. Yes. So in 2015, I published my first book. Hopefully in the future, this series will continue. This was about Seljuk and Ottoman masterpieces. I was very, very lucky to be sent around Turkey to photograph, to draw, to write about these locations. Basically, so if you see the title here, Memories of Seljuk and Ottoman Pieces, I thought to myself, the most boring thing I could do is just sit there and draw a mosque that you could Google a picture of online. And many people do that, and I didn't want to make another title that was like that. So this book is about my experience in those locations and what my eyes remember, and kind of like tracing how my my eyes digested these locations. So that's why you see bits and pieces and, you know, carnations growing out of different parts of, you know, ablution fountains and out of domes and all of this, because I mean, I can remember the first time I came to Turkey. It's gonna sound funny, but I had to sleep after I returned. I had to sleep for almost a week because of the visual inundation that, like,
So
my body actually needed to sleep. And then when I moved here,
capture that experience of sort of being overwhelmed and, you know, almost bombarded, as it were.
Yeah, well, and I come from Montreal, so I'm not coming from the most plastic. I feel bad if there's North Americans listening, from the most plastic of North American cities, right? Like, our history is significantly younger, but Montreal is known as a much more cultural and older city. So I can't imagine if I came from somewhere out west that was, you know, maybe only 100 years old. But yeah, it was definite visual overload. In a good way, of course. I'm still here. Here is another kind of.
Oh, Laurelie, we actually have a hello from Toronto for you.
Oh, hello. I'm curious who it is.
We have a number of ceramicists, I think, with us this evening. So I will share this follow-up question. So somebody is again picking up with this question of how to achieve the terracotta red. I have heard that they created also from mineral, I think iron, and that's why it's a bit projected.
It is an oxide, yeah, 100%. So terracotta, well, I mean, we could have a completely different conversation about materials, but oxides, if you are a ceramicist, you know, oxides, you're probably going to get a red, like an iron oxide, you're going to get a red or a black color from it, which is how we get, you know, if we have white clay or black clay or red clay has less, I believe, has less iron oxide. No, it's opposite. The black clay has less iron oxide in it than the red, I believe, because the red is an oxidization of iron. If you think of rust, when iron rusts, it turns red. It's the same thing in the earth. But yeah, I can do more follow-up questions on that later. So here's just some more details from the book. This one on the right is, oh boy, it must be İnci Minare, I think. I can't see the title right now, it's bad, I can't remember, but this is a few years ago I made this. And then we have details from Süleymaniye Mosque on the right, on the left. Yeah.
I love the way you've laid out the pages. And a shameless plug to everybody with us, but I have ordered this book this afternoon from Amazon, so if anybody was also interested, it is available. It looks fantastic, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, I hope you enjoy it. And as I said before, if we're ever able to travel in the future, I'll come sign it for you. So this next part here, we went as a group from the Prince's School, we went to Granada. And actually for the week and a half beforehand, I toured the south of Spain. And I became, you know, very immersed in the patterns, in the sometimes simplicity in the patterns. And then when I went to Alhambra, it was a similar kind of visual explosion all over again. And I mean, it's 4.5 or 5 years later, and I'm still decanting from the Alhambra. Still, it's incredible. These are just, you know, some sketches I made in situ. And okay. So the next, how are we on time, by the way?
Absolutely fine. It's past, so and I'm sure everybody with us is just happy for you to carry on taking us through. And I'll interject with
we have another question.
Oh, actually, this one. So another of our audience. Yeah, I think probably. I'm from Pakistan. We have traditional art in cobalt oxide and copper oxide, and it's called tashikari. So I think they're just extending the.
Okay. So if we, I'm just seeing if there's something around me I can grab right now. If you remember, and I'm just gonna do it. I don't care. I'm gonna get it. Okay. I should have been more prepared, but it's fine. Okay, so the copper oxide, if you think of copper that oxidizes, right, you get a nice turquoisey color. Mm-hmm. So that is that light blue you have in the Iznik. So you see here, this is a border tile. Okay, this here is copper oxide, and then this dark blue is cobalt oxide. And this red, you can see, it's not as, I was going to say pungent, but it's not as vibrant as the other one. I've been working to try to tone down, you know, the fire engine redness of it all. Mm. And then the other question, I have a piece of terracotta here. I don't know if the color picks up so well.
That's good.
But this is almost the correct color. But when you bake it with a clear lead glaze on top, it changes a bit because there's a chemical reaction. So the color gets a little deeper. So that would normally be where that red is. Here and there.
That one looks quite familiar.
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, next part here.
This page is fascinating, just seeing how you take a extraordinarily complex pattern and reduce it down and then really build it back up again. I mean that is the artist's eye, being able to.
I think that can kind of be a good analogy for life sometimes, right? Like sometimes we find ourselves in these very complex situations, but if you can kind of get through the thick of it and find the actual source and then go back from there, you're usually in a bit better of a situation than when you started. I can honestly say that when the reason why I went to the Princess School is because I was incredibly interested in geometry, and I had been teaching geometry at McGill University and at Concordia University in Montreal, and I knew I wanted to go more, but I realized that at times I'm very good at self-learning, but with some things I realized that I need a helping hand. So that's why I decided to do my master's at PSTA, because when it comes to geometry, there probably isn't another place better to learn it at the moment. So yeah, that's kind of the fruits of that labor. You can see the simplicity in the construction, but you would never know it until you break it down. That's the interesting part. So the next two slides, I believe, they are the amalgamation of some projects I did at Sabancı University using motion graphics and animation. So I have these octopuses, I don't know. I believe there's a rule about not being able to take a Greek word and then adding a Latin prefix or suffix. So I think it must be octopuses. But anyways, so these are some drawings I had here. I read a book called The Soul of an Octopus, I believe, by Cy Montgomery. And I found it very interesting the ability to that the octopus have to remember, and the sensitivity of these creatures. And I found that, you know, it has evolved into being a creature that doesn't have a shell where it had a shell before. And I kind of felt a little bit like an octopus, that I was just kind of like this gushy mess of, you know, sensitive nerves, so to speak. So if we see here, I started to integrate some of them into that pattern you saw before. So here's some of the legs. Unfortunately, this isn't a moving slide. So all of these little bits and pieces, they're all moving. The flowers are growing, the legs are moving. You know, you can see this piece at the bottom, it kind of spins off out. And what was also interesting is that there is a lot of folk tales surrounding octopus. It's known as the kraken. Also in Japanese culture, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but you know, in Western culture, it has a very negative connotation, or it did previously with sailors. So much so they wouldn't even say the creature's name for fear that it would kill sailors. And then what's interesting is in Eastern tradition, it is kind of revered for its ability to regenerate, because some octopuses can have their arms cut off and they can grow back. So I thought that was a really interesting tension between the two. And considering, you know, I live in Istanbul and I'm literally in between the East and the West on a daily basis. And it's a position I consistently find myself in. You know, I'm not from here and I'm not from there and I'm somewhere in the middle, and I'm okay with that now. It was hard kind of in the beginning, being from both sides of the street. But I've learned that I don't need to be either or, and being somewhere in the middle, you know, I enjoy now, but it took a long time to get there.
It takes confidence and self-belief, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then you kind of get to the point where, like, well, at least for me, there are so many voices, whether it's in art, whether it's in your society or your culture or your religion or whatever it may be, there's always noise. There's always background noise. And for a long time, I tried to control the noise, and I realized it's impossible. And absolutely everyone will bring, and I don't say baggage in a bad way, but everyone brings with them their experiences on the side, right? So how they're going to see your work is going to be different from someone else. And that's the beauty of it. But at the same time, it can be difficult, because some of my teachers, as I'll show you here, and I'll talk about these female Muslim traveler project. Some of my teachers were like very confused with these travelers, very confused, and I was confused why they were confused. And
as a woman traveler yourself.
Exactly. And usually the most confused opinions I got were also from other women. So I was stuck there scratching my head for 2 years trying to figure out what the problem was. But I kind of see these female Muslim travelers as a bit of a rebellion in a way. And also in this picture here, this is kind of like part astral projection, part like sleeping and dreaming at the same time. I just want to ask you quickly, can you hear the azan in the background?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you're welcome to everyone. I hope it's not too loud. I'll continue.
No, it's lovely.
Also here, there are some constellations. This is something that also here some different constellation animals and some geometry, and we have a sea morgue down in the bottom, which is a very interesting creature you can find in Persian literature. Also in the Conference of the Birds. If you haven't read the Conference of the Birds, you should go do it. I'm not gonna share anything about it. You should just go read it. And it's a very interesting creature. So yeah, we have these ladies here, and each of them are on their own path, but they're all connected to each other. It's one of those pet projects that's just kind of doing what it wants. If you see behind me, we have some of the travelers. Can we see here? Yeah, there we go. You can see the bus. You can see the ladies. You can see the other bus. I'll show you. Also, we have some of this one. I'll show you in more detail. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but I'll figure it out. Also, I was influenced by the Shahnameh, the Persian epic, the Book of the Kings, and I thought, why can't we have a Book of the Queens? It's 2020. I believe it took 30 years to write that book. So, I mean, I'm only 3 years in. Talk to me in 27. Let's see the next slide. These are some of their travel vehicles. I mean, if you haven't noticed, I kind of like to joke a little bit. So there's a little bit of playfulness and sarcasm and that in it. Like we have this bus here. I call it the Mashallah bus. It's just kind of like dilapidated and crappy, but someone loved it so much to decorate it, you know? Same with the plane here, but this is like modeled after a toy plane. Yeah, so let's see the next one.
So tell us a little bit more about the motifs that you were using across the.
Yes, of course. Plane. So we have some geometry here, some Islamic geometry, and then we have some tepelic forms, which are, you know, throughout the Muslim world. You find that, you know, in Mughal India, you find it in Iran, in Turkey, probably in the Levant, like in Egypt and in Syria. Those are very common. So this band here. I have a bit of an obsession with the sun and the moon. So I like to include, we also have a little sun here on the tail of the plane.
One of our participants is saying that they absolutely adore the plane and they would love to see it in the sky. So would I.
With a little banner on the back of it, you know? Yeah. Well, that's perhaps another thing too, is when I was doing my master's, my second master's, I felt that the tactility and the enjoyment of art was kind of, you know, secondary or tertiary, or not even on the list of priorities. And I'm someone who, whether it be with my ceramics or the artwork I do, or even the food I make, or I even sew my own clothes. I've gone that far. That I want people to enjoy it. I don't want to just stand there for 30 seconds and look at it and move on. You know, and perhaps I'm making a statement about current contemporary art. But if any of my friends from the university are watching, I'm in trouble. But that's partially why I made these drawings the way they are. Also, they're made on craft paper, which is interesting because, you know, Indian miniature, which I studied also, there's a process that I learned. there is, you know, special paper you use that prevents the paintings from disintegrating over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Craft paper is acidic. So I'm aware that these will be around for a little bit, and I'm okay with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I also have maybe a psychological thing where if it's really good paper, I always mess up on it. So yeah, I like using different materials on top of it. Perhaps to kind of bring it down for us lay people, so to speak. I don't know. But perhaps make it a little bit more approachable. Probably that's why I'm doing it. Next one, this is the unfinished bus and the beetle. And you can see some of the ladies at the bottom there again. At this point in the game, I'm just kind of exploring and enjoying that process. And I'm not, you know, putting any pressure on when it's going to be finished, how it's going to look. I'm just, for the first time, I'm going about it very organically. These ones, and just kind of letting it happen. Let's see here. Oh, and also this bus has a very special ability, and that is it can transform into anything based on what the travelers need. So if it needs to have, if it needs to have camouflage, then it can. If it needs to be able to float, then it can. If it needs to be able to jump 1,000,000 miles in 5 seconds, it can. That kind of, you know, absurdity, but at the same time, childlike imagination.
Magic.
Yeah.
Somebody's literally just said, like, the magic school bus.
Yes, exactly. Like, but we don't have a Miss Frizzle. Oh yes, here's another example of same bus but different. And this is, I kind of put these ones at the end so you could see how I'm tying it back in with the blue and white. I didn't show that many paintings of blue and white. We only have so much time. But, you know, this is a real mix of different blooms, different styles. You know, in the center there we have a very Safavid kind of bird, eagle perhaps. And yeah, it's just, I get obsessive about blue for some reason.
The gradations of blue in that are absolutely exquisite.
It's one color of blue too. It's not different colors. It's just different intensities from the same tube. Yeah. And I've done that. So any of the blue work that you see here, it's all from one single tube. And the next one we can see, this is an expansion, kind of another dreamscape. In the center, we have kind of a half Burak, half Lamassu. For those who don't know, the Burak was the creature that brought the prophet through the 7 heavens. And also the Lamassu was an ancient Sumerian protector of the city. I'm not sure if in the UK there are any examples of them, but I believe in the Louvre there is, and I visited the one in the Pergamon. And interestingly enough, the Lamassu was what really, really interested me in Mesopotamian and Islamic art, Anatolian art, everything. I'm still searching to understand why exactly that is, but I found the creature itself to be quite magical. This one's unfinished at the moment, but the Lamassu is also female, but it's bearded, and it has the legs of a lion, and the wings of an eagle.
Mm.
So it's quite an interesting creature itself. And
Do you
then,
remember at Leighton House? I don't know if you can visualize when you walk into the hall to your left, there's that panel which has the two birds at the top, and there are. I think one of our experts is on here. She might jump in and help me out, but I'm sure there are these sort of magical creatures at the bottom where it's a sort of a lion with wings and.
yeah, there are some griffins, there are some burrock, there are quite a few. So that's something that I really enjoy. Also in Topkapı Palace, there are some blue and white creatures also in the circumcision panel, which I know it sounds rough, but the circumcision pavilion on the exterior of that pavilion in Topkapı Palace, there are some interesting hunting scenes. And some parrots too. And let's see here. Next one. Yes, and I wanted to share, because I said a few times, the museum work. So
if I could just jump in before we move on. So somebody very kindly has commented that there is a lamassu at the British Museum.
Okay, perfect. So you can go visit.
We can get out and go. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, they're huge.
I think this makes for a natural lead to where you're going with these final couple of slides. But somebody has actually asked, how do you see the direction of traditional ceramic training going?
Oh, what a question.
That was a big sigh.
Yeah, well, it's a little hard because so in Turkey, for example, they have created something called İSMEK, which is a great initiative. But then also at the same time, I believe İSMEK is the largest open university in the world, from what I understand. But also there they have kind of, perhaps I could say, standardized the teaching of illumination, of ceramics, of most of the traditional arts. So then what ends up happening is you get a certain amount of teachers, then start teaching other students, and then they start teaching other students. So then you get, everything kind of looks the same sometimes. And maybe that's a bit harsh, but so in an attempt to preserve the tradition, it kind of makes it a little static, which is interesting. Also, Iran has a good, I'm not sure if it's comparable to Turkey, but they have a good kind of tradition. Even in the UK, you have a lot of throwers that are doing apprenticeships, and there's money for apprenticeships and supporting people learning how to do that. When it comes to trying to preserve traditional Islamic techniques, it's difficult because a lot of people don't understand. There's two sides of this. A lot of people don't understand the amount of money it costs to buy it. So if you want to support it, it's not going to be cheap. I worked recently on a 40 by 40 tiles, 40 centimeters by 40 centimeters, and very detailed. And I'm not going to share the price, but the person understood, that there is a large amount of quality or high amount of quality, and it took me 3 weeks.
I was going to say
the level of detail, and also the size is quite cumbersome. And then the other side of this is a lot of people get kind of enamored by traditional arts, and they're like, all right, let's go, and they want to learn right away. And then maybe 2 or 3 weeks into it, they're like, oh, this is work. So on both sides of it, there's rose-colored glasses sometimes.
Enthusiasm, maybe
sorry, tell me again.
A lot of enthusiasm, that maybe some naivety, really.
Yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't say that's just specific to traditional arts. What's interesting though is, you know, in working with museums around the world, you know, I get students that come back so that maybe they're not going to become um, a master tile painter or something like that. But you have to be aware that you're planting a seed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and part of the reason why we do the museum education is because we want, it's an outreach kind of program in a way. You know, we want to foster some type of appreciation, some type of understanding, and also respect for the process too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of my students, so in the work I'm going to show you here, and it's interesting, I believe this pattern is in Leighton House also, is it not?
It is.
Yeah, I sneakily did that. um, yeah, it's very opportunistic. But so with the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha, I'm very lucky to work with them. They pretty much let me do whatever I want to do in terms of, you know, working with the exhibition. So last year or the year before, last year must have been, there was an exhibition called Syria Matters. And there are some Damascene tiles in that collection. So I thought, you know what? We're going to do Damascus tiles.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we ended up doing. So you can see two very lovely students here working hard on their test tiles. And then here, I recreated the pattern, which then the students were able to recreate. They did a group panel project. So if you see the next slide, this is in the kiln,
Mm-hmm.
and then this is the finished product. So what I want to say is, look, it's not perfect, but I never stressed to the students for it to be perfect. I wanted it to be living. You know, I wanted it to have everyone's hands in it. I think it's incredibly beautiful on its own. Um, and it has a very natural rhythm to it that I think you find in a lot of the tiles. You know, if you look at them closely, if you spend time with the Iznik or the Damascene or any type of ceramic closely, you see the hands that made it, and that's the important part for me. You know, you can see the craftsmanship, you can see maybe the person learning, you can
Mm-hmm.
see maybe where they had a hard time or where a line was very beautiful. And it's kind of a slice of a moment, right? These
Mm-hmm.
pieces, and it's then solidified for time
Mm-hmm.
underneath the glaze, which is quite a, you know, I sound like I'm making an opening for Jurassic Park, but you understand that that you know it's interesting to continue the tradition. Um, and I want to stress the fact that like most of these students had never done this before.
Well, we actually have one with us this evening, and
Oh,
she's
which
saying it was
one?
Maya.
Oh, Maya's in the photo. Sorry, Maya, I'm calling her out. She's this
She's
lovely
saying
lady
very
here.
much. She's lovely. Lorelei, I think our time is up.
I believe so. Yeah.
If you stop sharing your screen, perfect. So many thanks. It's absolutely wonderful talk, and I can't wait to actually meet you and welcome you
Yes,
back
hopefully.
to Leighton House. Just fascinating, and thank you to everybody who's been with us this evening for your. There's been so many comments about how beautiful your work is.
Thank you very much.
Clearly, what an inspiring teacher you are as well. Yeah, people are coming in saying how they've really loved it. So thank you very much. If I could just mention that our fourth talk in the series is on the 24th of July, same time, and the artist in conversation is Aisha Gamiet, who is a manuscript illuminator, funnily enough, after you mentioned that you'd already studied illumination. So I hope everybody can join us for the next talk on the 24th. And Laurelie, thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thank
Yes,
you.
you as well.
And goodbye to everybody.